are in the database. Now, we want to also, or I want to also talk to you about how you actually give the survey. And we proposed to you two different ways that kind of came out of the experiment that we did in the first wave of how to do this effectively. So one of the things I think that we have learned is that particularly around getting physicians to fill out the survey, that in most hospitals it's difficult to give the survey by email. So that we have gone to recommending to most people that the physician part of the survey be done on paper, because we think your response rates can be higher if you go to paper. But there are two ways of doing it that we propose. The first is that everybody gets paper. The second, which I'll show you in a second, but this first one is to combine paper and email so that the physicians would get a paper survey, and if you have email addresses for everybody on your OR staff, that we can help you give this survey by email, which a lot of people find is easier. It's actually easier for us to analyze the data because it's always electronic and never has to be turned from paper into electronic data. But also it can be easier. But you can't do it if there's two ways you can't do it. You can't do it if you don't have emails for all your staff, or if they don't have access to email. You also can't do it if the email addresses of your staff can't be shared with an outside entity like us. That also makes it impossible. So these are the two ways that we would propose doing it. So I want to go by them in terms of deeper instructions just to get you thinking about the mechanics that are involved in giving the surveys. So, physicians complete the survey on paper. OR staff do it by email. In order to do that, we need a spreadsheet created of OR personnel so that we know how many people are working in your operating room. That does a whole bunch of things. One is it's a way to transmit the email addresses to us. Ultimately, it's a way to tell you what the response rate was in your hospital, because we can count people up and see how many people of each kind responded to the survey. So, if the physicians do it on paper and the OR staff does it on email, we need to get a spreadsheet from you, and I'll show you an example of that in a second, that will give us their email addresses and also give us solid counts of who's working in your operating room. There's another reason for creating this spreadsheet, and we're going to talk about it in a few more calls, but eventually we want you to use that spreadsheet as a way to keep track of who's been educated, who's been talked to, and who hasn't as you go through and do this work. So there are two reasons for creating the spreadsheet. Now here's a picture of the spreadsheet, and it's pretty simple. We're going to send you a copy of the spreadsheet in an email so that you will have it, and you can see that it has names, it has roles, which means the kind of jobs that the people do, whether they're an administrator, an anesthesiologist, a CRNA, a nurse, a perfusionist, or whatever job it is they do in your operating room. And then finally, an email address. We only want the email addresses if that's the way that you want to give the survey, though. If you don't want to give the survey that way, if you want to be all on paper, that's fine. You don't need to give us any email addresses. If you want to have us help you give it electronically, which we're happy to do, we need the email address part of this spreadsheet filled out. So we will email you the spreadsheet. I think you'll find it very helpful in doing the work from here on. And if you decide to do the culture survey, like I said, it can be very helpful to us to be able to help you know what % of people have actually taken the survey for you. So, physicians complete the survey on paper, OR complete the survey by email, and let me go through the steps that you would need to do to actually do that. There will be also sent to you a copy of these steps, so you don't have to remember it, but I just want to, again, plant it in your brain of what it would take to actually do this. Every survey, every paper survey has with it a cover letter that tells people why they're getting the survey and explains to them that the survey is voluntary. It's meant to be customized so that you're a piece of it, so that the letter actually is coming from you and from your hospital. So the very first thing that we need you to do is to modify the cover letter, and we're going to send everybody along with that spreadsheet. We'll send out a cover letter for you, a cover letter template basically that needs to be modified. We need your mailing address, and we'll ask you for that in the email so that we can send you the paper surveys. And what we'll do there is to send you, we'll ask you how many that you think you need, ballpark. We can send you the surveys already ready to give out and put them in a FedEx envelope. You get them, and we'll already have stuff in the envelope for you to send it back. Trying to make it as easy on you as possible so that we'll get you the surveys, we'll get you the number of surveys that you need, then your job ends up being just to get the surveys filled out, put them in the envelope, and send them back to us. That's relatively straightforward. If we're going to use the emails for you, the way that the system works is that we send up to 3 emails. The email system can actually keep track of who responds. We don't know who responds. They're anonymous, but the system does. And if somebody doesn't respond, it can send out reminder emails so that they could get up to 3 emails asking them to take the survey, and then the survey machine stops, and it doesn't send out any more emails after that. There's also ways available for people to opt out that they're offered in the email. So if somebody gets the email and says they don't want to be bothered anymore, there's a way to opt out of it and they won't get sent any more emails. So that's the way of doing it with the physicians on paper and the OR staff by email. Now, they both count on that spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet is very, very important that way. Now, the other way that we're happy to support from up here, because we have the technology to turn pieces of paper into data, is to use paper surveys for everybody. And some hospitals find that more convenient. Again, particularly hospitals where the emails are not, are either not available or are considered sensitive, and your system or your hospital doesn't want to release them to anybody, and we understand that, then paper is the way to go. To do the paper survey process, again, we need that spreadsheet, but we don't want any email addresses. So you don't need to fill that part out at all. We do want to know who's in your hospital and what role they have so that we can count people up, and we want you to have a spreadsheet already filled out then that lists everybody that you're eventually going to want to interact with as we do this work. If you do it on paper, we're going to want you to modify the cover letter for your hospital again, because you would include that with every paper survey. And then finally, we need your mailing address so that we can FedEx you the surveys, and you can FedEx them back to us, and that's all taken care of. So the big decision, well, there's actually 3 probably then, that you need to make. Do I want to do the culture survey? And we encourage you to think seriously about that.